Thank you for checking out Coastal Community Church. We hope that you receive hope and encouragement through this week's message. If this ministry has impacted your life in any way, please share your story at mystory@coastalcommunity.tv. We hope you enjoy the service.
Well, good morning, Pompano. How you guys doing this morning? You guys doing well? Fantastic. This is the hardcore crew, the 1150 service at Pompano Beach. Like, you are the ones that truly love Jesus the most out of all of our four services. That's what I always tell myself, at least, because you like sleeping, which is probably more the case. Anybody excited for a day off tomorrow? Anybody? Couple of you, the rest of you, you're like, I have to work. I hate you. Okay, that's great. Fantastic. Hey, my name is TJ. I'm one of the pastors here. We're glad that you're with us. And before we kind of dive in today, you saw a promo video for a series coming up called Immeasurably More. Everybody say Immeasurably More. Immeasurably More. Okay, that wasn't everybody. I've got like 33 minutes, so we can do this all day. Everybody say Immeasurably More. Okay, that still wasn't everybody. I can see you not moving your lips, you know. So, like, I 29 minutes and 3 seconds. So, everybody say immeasurably more. Immeasurably more. Perfect. Yeah. Lane, going louder does not make everybody else say it. I'm just FYI. Sorry, there's one person that's always louder than everybody else. But we have a brand new series coming up in 2 weeks called Immeasurably More. And this is like the series that I've been waiting for all year. I can't wait to share in this series. In fact, on September 18th is actually our 7-year anniversary, which is an incredible day for us as a church. So I know that that's not the case for you guys. You guys are much newer than that. But overall, as a church, we're 7 years old. And the big deal about that is that on every anniversary service is free T-shirt Sunday. And so if you've been wanting a Coastal T-shirt, that's the day where we're slinging them like crack rock. I don't know, that's a terrible analogy, but we're giving them away like candy. Yeah. And so it's going to be a great day. We have a lot of fun. But not only that, but we're going to give an update on what's happening with the land that we purchased in Parkland for that campus expansion. And so, anyways, we're going to want to be here for that Sunday. There's invite cards in your worship guide. It's going to be a fantastic, fantastic day. We have been in a series called Run over the last couple of weeks. If you've missed it, I want to encourage you, go back, check it out online. It's been good. I'm a little biased, but it really has been good. I've gotten more comments and emails and different things from people. And the whole idea behind this series is throughout the Bible, there is this correlation between the life that you're living and a race that God has set before us. You see it over and over again in Scripture. That's what God compares our life to, is this race that we have. And so if there is a race that we are supposed to be in life, then we should probably be running that race. We should be running with a pace and a speed in such a way that we will end up at the end of our lives winning that race. And this whole series has been based off of a scripture in Hebrews chapter 12. In verse 1, it says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. Now, we haven't really defined what that is, but if you were to actually look, the chapters in the Bible we separate them so we know exactly where things are, so you can turn there. That's what happened. But when this was originally written, this was written as a letter. And so chapter 11 and chapter 12 just flowed together. There was no distinction between those two. So it wasn't like chapter 11, verse 29 ended, and then, we're in a new thought. This is actually a continuation of a thought. And the chapter before is talking about all the people that have gone before you that have run the race successfully. Like, they have accomplished the goal, they've finished the race, they won the prize, and it's talking about them and saying, hey, listen, as you're running a race, there is this group of people that is surrounding you, that is cheering you on, that is encouraging you to run your race the best way possible. And he says, so since we're surrounded by such this great cloud of witnesses, let us strip off every weight and the sin that so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that has been set before us. There is a race that God has set before us, and God wants us to run and endure this race, and He wants us to get to the end of the race like we talked about last week, and we should run in such a way that we would win that race. Now, when I think about running a race, I automatically go to like an Olympic race event. I think about like the 10,000 meter run, and you show up for the 10,000 meter run, and the track is set up for you. You got to go around the track this many times, and when you hit that final time, you've finished your race. And a lot of us feel like that's how it should be following God. Like there should be this really easy, distinct course set up for us where we show up in our solid gold Nike shoes, and we have the right outfit on, and we just run around and run around and run around. Eventually we finish and we get up on the podium. But I don't believe that the race that God has set before us is like an Olympic track and field event. I would actually submit to you today that it's probably more like an adventure race. Anybody out there ever done an adventure race, like a Spartan race or any of those things? There's 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, we got a couple Spartan racers in here. We got a couple of those people. Well, if you've never done an adventure race, I want to encourage you to do it. We got one coming up here in like a month in October in Lake Worth somewhere. There's going to be an adventure race. There's a Spartan race. But last year there was a girl in our church. She's a fellow CrossFitters United, and we stick together. And she was like, "Hey, you've been CrossFitting. Why don't you come do this adventure race? Like, why don't you come do this Spartan race with me? We can go and kick everybody's butt." And I don't know about you, but I'm up to beat other people anytime I can. Like anytime I can compete with something and beat somebody in it, like I'm game for that all day long because I like winning. Anybody else like winning? Yeah. Okay. For all of you guys that don't, apparently you like losing. Okay, so not sure what that's about. We'll pray for you after service. But I like winning, and so I'm like, can we beat other? She's like, man, we'll kill people, and I'm like, I'm down. Like, sign me up. And so we sign up for this adventure race, and I show up, and it's down in Davie, and it's at this former landfill that is now a park. Thank you, Broward County. Way to maximize your space. And the only problem is that for like the 5 days prior to the race, we had torrential downpours. And so we show up, Shayla's racing with me and this other lady, and we show up and like the entire course is underwater. Like we literally go to the starting line and there is water up to our like mid-thighs. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried to run a race in like a lake, but you don't run real fast in that moment. And so I remember we start this race and we take off running and we're running through this water. Eventually, we start going up what used to be the landfill, because it's a mountain like Monarch Mountain over here in Pompano. And so we're starting to run up that mountain, and it's becoming like a mudslide and like almost like bowling. So somebody slips and falls and takes down 30 other people. It's awesome. And so you try to run around that. And as we're running, this is a 5-mile course, we get to about a mile in and we hit our first obstacle. And the first obstacle is like a wall that's up to our waist. And so naturally, you just kind of hurdle that thing like no big deal, And we continue running along, and then we come to another wall, and it's about to our chest. And of course, you just jump over that, no big deal. Like, at least that's my perception of it. And you continue on, and you go through some more walls that eventually get over your head. Then you get to a wall that's like inverted, where you have to like climb along and use upper body strength and pull yourself up and over. It's getting kind of fun now, and like we're going along and we're getting to these walls that are becoming larger and larger and larger until finally there is like a 12-foot wall that virtually nobody can scale. Like it is the insurmountable, impenetrable, unable to overtake wall of the course, and it's where people fail a lot. And as I was thinking about that adventure race of hitting that wall and going, man, how in the world am I going to get over this? So many times that's like our life. We have this vision from God, we have this dream, or we have this hope, and we start running after that thing, and there are some little obstacles along the way, but at some point we hit a wall that seems insurmountable. That seems like, how in the world am I going to overcome this thing that is in my life? And we get overwhelmed by that moment, and we get overtaken by that moment. And it's so tempting when we're in those seasons to think, like, did I make a wrong turn somewhere, God? Like, why am I coming up against this wall? This surely can't be God if I'm hitting something that seems like I can't overtake it. And I would challenge you that that's probably exactly where God wants you to go, because this is what I know for every single one of us, that as we're running the race that God has set before us, there are going to be some obstacles that are going to stand in our way. There are going to be some challenges that are going to confront us. There are going to be some difficulties that are going to be mounted in our path. And maybe you've experienced some of those at this point. Maybe you had a dream for your finances, and then 2007 hit, and the recession hit, and the dream of becoming a multimillionaire was destroyed in the middle of a housing collapse, and you've been trying to recover from it, but yet there's still this wall that you're facing when it comes to your credit and your life as you want to move forward in your financial goals. Maybe for others of you, it's relational. You looked at your life and you thought, man, I'd be married with 2 kids right now, and I'm single and I'm 32. And every guy that I run into isn't good enough, or every girl that I run into just doesn't have the qualities that I'm looking for, and you feel like I'm up against the wall when it comes to my relationships. Or maybe you're married and you thought it was going to be all hunky-dory, and all you have is a bunch of tension. And you thought, well, man, what is this wall of anger that we're facing in our relationship? What is this wall of tension that we can't seem to get past to have a normal, civilized conversation? Maybe it's in your career. You thought you would be at this point right now, but you found out you leaned your ladder up against the wrong building. You climbed the top of success there and found out that wasn't where you wanted to be at all anyways. You're starting all over again, and it feels like you're up against the wall. Listen, you and I, we're not the first people to run into walls as we're chasing the promise that we believe that God has put in our heart. In fact, there's a group of people in the Old Testament called the Israelites, and they're led by a guy named Joshua, who were facing the same very thing. They had been wandering for 40 years in a desert, and God comes down after the patriarch Moses has died, and comes down and speaks to Joshua and says, man, you are the man of the hour. You've been anointed. You've been equipped to lead these people into the promised land that I've been promising them for years. And you're going to take it. It's going to be incredible. You're going to see everything that I've been telling you about. And in the same sentence that he's telling Joshua about this incredible promise that he's about to take, that he's saying, like, listen, the time is now, and you're the man for the time, and you better get ready. At the same point that he's saying that, he says to Joshua in chapter 1, verses 6 through 9, it's not in your outline. He says 3 times within 3 verses, be strong and courageous. Joshua, I need you to be strong and courageous. Listen, the land is yours. The time is now. You're going to lead the people, but I want you to know you need to be strong and courageous. You need to be strong and courageous. And God doesn't just say that to Joshua. I believe that he says that to every single one of us. Man, God has got an incredible promise. He's got an incredible plan for every single one of us. But in the midst of that plan, in that promise, he's saying, be strong and be courageous. Why? Because even though God has given you an incredible promise, that does not mean that he has not promised difficulties along the way. That does not mean that he doesn't say that you're not going to hit some walls along the way. And that's important for us to note, because we think that, man, following Jesus should be all rainbows and butterflies, right? Should be easy. But last time I checked, reading Jesus' life, there was not much easy about his life. Being persecuted for your beliefs is not very easy. Being arrested for your beliefs and beaten is not very easy. Being hung on a cross would be considered a wall in my book. Dying on that cross would be even a bigger wall. Then having to raise from the dead. Anybody in here raise themselves from the dead? Okay, so it's difficult. So if there's all of these difficulties in Jesus' life, why would we expect anything less for the promises of God? Why would we expect to not face those same things? And see, God never promises no difficulties. What he promises is that he would always be present in the midst of the difficulties. And so, God's like, Joshua, man, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to make this come forth, but you have got to be strong and courageous because somewhere along your path, you're going to run into a wall called Jericho. And I believe that God would say that to every single one of us. At some point, as you're following Jesus, as you're following and running after him, you are going to hit your Jericho. In Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, it says this. It says, now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go out or in. But the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you Jericho, its king, and all of its strong warriors. So God is like, Joshua, you got this. This is all yours. But FYI, the gates are tightly shut. And so it would not be uncommon for an army to come up against a fortified city, to come up against a city that had walls around it. But Jericho was a little bit different. In fact, I have a picture here of Jericho's walls, and it's called the walls of Jericho for a reason. A lot of people think walls, oh, it's a singular wall. No, it's plural for a reason because Jericho was built on top of a mountain, which meant that the walls of the city were actually on the side of the mountain. And it wasn't just one wall, but it was two walls. It was an outer wall and an inner wall leading into the city. And so you think when you would go attack a city, there's a couple of methods that you would use to attack a city. One of the methods would be like ladders and ramps. And so you would try to go over the wall. And so it'd be really logical. We'll put ladders up and build some ramps and we'll go over the wall. The problem with that with Jericho was the fact that just because you get over one wall doesn't mean you're going to be able to pull all that stuff over the wall to get it over the second set of walls. And so you can't go over the wall to get into Jericho. Well, the next logical choice would be, you know what, I'm going to dig a tunnel and go underneath. The only problem is that it's on the side of a hill. So if you go down, you dig a tunnel, what are you doing? You're digging yourself in a hole. Anybody ever dug themselves in a hole that they couldn't get out of? Jericho might have been the origin of that. I don't know. I'm just saying. So you can't go over and you can't go under. So the next logic, we'll go through the wall. You would think that we'll get battering rams and we'll run and we'll just batter against the wall and eventually break it down. The problem is because it's on a mountainside, it means the terrain is uphill, which means all the momentum you would normally gain running, you lose as you're trying to go up. And so you can't go over, you can't go under, you can't go through. What do you do in that situation? Well, a lot of people think, well, we'll just starve them out. They've actually found the city of Jericho and dug up its ruins. And the season that Israel would have attacked Jericho would have been right after their harvest season. They actually found enough food in stores underneath the city and the rubble that the people in Jericho could have survived for 2 years walled up inside their city. That's a long time. So you can't go over, you can't go under, you can't go through. You can't starve them out. Maybe we can trick them out, maybe like a Trojan horse. The problem is the gates were tightly shut. So what do you do when you and I come up against a wall? We're running our race, the race that God has set before us to the promise that he has given us, and we come up against an impenetrable wall. We come up against an obstacle that seems insurmountable to our lives because it's not if we're going to do that, it's just when. What do we do? And I think Joshua and the Israelites, they give us some insight and some things we should expect if we're going to continue to run our race when we come up against the walls. And if you're taking notes, the first thing that we need to know is we need to expect resistance. We need to expect some resistance. And a lot of people, they automatically think of resistance as a negative thing. Like, man, if there's resistance, that's probably not God. And let me just tell you something. That's probably not the case. Because this is what I learned. When I was a junior in high school, I suffered a pretty devastating shoulder injury. I dislocated my shoulder. And I thought that was going to probably end all my sports career and all my athletic dreams and goals in life. And I remember going to the hospital, them setting my shoulder back in place and getting me all set up and them recommending me to go to therapy, physical therapy. I'd never been to physical therapy. I had no idea what physical therapy was like. I remember showing up to this physical therapist's office and the therapist walking out and meeting me in the foyer. And it was this older grandmotherly type lady. She was sweet. She was short. She was like the kind of lady that I was like, oh, but she'll probably bake me some cookies. Like she just seemed that kind of way. Like she just was nice and sweet. And I remember walking back to the area where her section for physical therapy was, and is behind this little curtain. And she went from being sweet and nice grandma to tyrant. And like she started grabbing my arm and started twisting and pulling and doing. I'm like, Grandma, you're hurting me. She's like, I don't care. You know, it's like the devil, their exorcist was starting to come out of her. And I was like, kill Grandma. You know, I was like, and she was doing all this stuff and she got these rubber bands out and she was making me do all these exercises. And I was like, these are killing my shoulder. Lady, do you not understand? My shoulder got dislocated. She's like, I know. Keep stretching. Keep pulling on those bands. I'm like, no, it hurts. She's like, keep pulling. I didn't understand in the moment. Like I was like, I don't like this. But 10 weeks later, when I finished my therapy and I went and started working out again, I realized something at that time. That my shoulder was stronger than it ever was before I got hurt. Why? Because of resistance. All that tension built up the muscles all around my socket to keep my shoulder in place. And I would submit to you today that God is like our spiritual physical therapist. He's always bringing seasons of stretching and seasons of resistance in our life. And a lot of times we think, well, I'm following God, there shouldn't be any resistance. Actually, when you're following God, you should expect some more resistance. Because it's in the resistance, it's in the stretching that God is preparing you for the work that He has for you. You want to the end game. You want to get to the promise. And all of us, we get so focused on getting the results at the end of the day. Like, I want to win. That's what I focus on. I want to win. And what we forget is that God isn't as concerned about where we're going as who we're becoming. That's what God really cares about. He cares about who are you becoming in the process of running your race. In fact, I love what John Ortberg, who's a pretty famous Christian author and pastor, he says, oftentimes what God does in us while we wait is more important than what we're waiting for. So let that sit in there. What God does in us while we wait is more important than what we're waiting for. See, God's greatest work isn't what's happening through us. God's greatest work is what's happening in us. And we get so consumed with the promise. And I'm speaking for myself here. That we forget that there's a process to the promise. And the process is the point. Because at the end of the day, if we accomplish and we don't become, we lose. So God is telling us, like, listen, guys, you're running. You got to expect some resistance to come. You got to expect some walls in your life. And when you hit those walls, number two, what you got to do is you got to magnify God and not the wall. You got to magnify God in those moments and not the wall. Because we all get stuck in life, don't we? And listen, we're not the only ones that get stuck. There's animals I've found got stuck. And so I found some pictures of animals that got stuck this week that I thought were pretty funny. Like I found this dog that I don't know how he got stuck in a root beer can box, but apparently his sniffer got him in the wrong place. What's funny is that like he doesn't even seem to care that he's stuck in a root beer box. Like he's like, hey dude, I'm chilled. Or how about this one? This dog, he's stuck in a trash can lid. Have no idea where he's been, right? Except for the diaper that's in the corner, like he might have been there. But my favorite is, just because I hate them, is the cat that got stuck. Where's the cat? Yeah. Like every cat needs to get stuck like that, and you just sit down in front of them, you know, like just cover that joker up. Hate cats. I swear, like when people die and go to hell, it's full of cats. That's got to be hell. Just saying. I don't have any scriptural evidence, but I've got a feeling. So, every time I look at that, I just want to laugh. I'm like, that cat, he's in trouble. When we're stuck, I mean, we can make fun of that, but it's not really funny. And it's not a lot of fun. And I don't know about you, but when I get stuck, it's so easy for me to focus all of my thoughts, all of my attention, all of my energy on the problem. Like every conversation is seasoned with that problem. Everything that's processing in my mind is how do I fix that problem? How do I overcome that problem? What would it look like if I turn that problem to the side? Like I just overanalyze the problem. And it's so easy for us to magnify the problem. And I don't want to diminish the problem that you're going through today, because I realize that some of us are facing some really, really difficult problems in life. And right now you look at that wall and you're like, this thing is so overwhelming and so insurmountable. But what would happen? What would happen if instead of putting so much focus and so much energy on the problem, we just put some of that attention and that energy into magnifying God? Like, what do you think God would do in that situation in your life? Do you think all of a sudden you start to see his power maybe play out a little bit more positively in your life? See, it would have been really easy for the Israelites to focus on the wall, but I love what Joshua does. Joshua follows the methodology of his predecessor, Moses, and he sends some spies into the land, and they go check out the city of Jericho before the Israelites get to it, and they encounter a woman named Rahab. And I think what Rahab says to these spies is really profound, and I want to read it to you out of Joshua chapter 2, verses 8 through 11. It says, before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up to the roof to talk with them. This is what she said. I know the Lord has given you this land, she told them, for we are all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. For we have heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. Here is the most unlikely woman having this conversation. Here is a Jerichonian prostitute who is magnifying the power and the presence of God over the insurmountable obstacle that the Israelites see. And I think it's so interesting that the enemy would be the one that magnifies God to encourage the people of God to overtake the city. Like, just imagine that. Like, God is so gracious and so good that, like, as big as our problems seem, he's like, hey, listen, the enemy knows how big I am, and they always glorify me. In the middle of your struggle, like, they're gonna recognize me. The problem is, do we recognize him? And we forget how big and how awesome our God is. We forget about the fact that our God is all powerful. He's the creator of the heavens and the earth. He created everything in it by the sound of his voice. And with one word, he can change everything in our life. There isn't a single thing in this world that is not under the fingertip of his control. He is all-encompassing, all-powerful. And not only is God all-powerful, but he's all-knowing. And so many times we run up against our walls and we think, oh my gosh, like, where did this come from? Listen, God's not surprised by your wall. Tim, he's not up in heaven going, oh my gosh, do you see what happened to Tim? Stop heaven right now. Hold up, angels. Tim is in need. I didn't see this coming. Like, God saw that coming 10,000 years ago, people. Like, he's not surprised. You might be surprised, but he's not. Not only did he know it was coming, but he knows the solution. So God's all powerful and he's all knowing, but here's the best news. He's always present. Always present. He says, never will I leave you or never will I forsake you. When you think you're all alone, God is there. I love what Psalm 139 says. It says, I can never escape from your spirit. I love the vividness. Like, we can't escape God. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you know what? You're there. If I go down to the grave, you know what? You're there too. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, but even in the darkness I cannot hide from you. To you the night shines as bright as day. The darkness and the light are the same to you. When we're in that moment where we hit that wall and we're in the shadow of that wall, it can feel pretty dark in that moment. It can feel pretty overwhelming and like we're forgotten and we're alone. And God says, listen, there's nowhere that you can end up that will ever take you out of my presence. I've got you. See, we need to realize that we don't need to fix our problem. We need to fix our mindset. And when we fix our mindset, it fixes the problem. That's why God is like, listen, don't magnify your problem, magnify me. See, when we magnify our problem, we become weak and powerless. When we magnify God, we get the reality of the situation that we are with an all-powerful God that gives us the ability to do all things through him who strengthens us. And today we need to realize that, man, we need to not just expect resistance, but we need to embrace that resistance. When that resistance comes and it seems insurmountable, don't focus on the problem, but we need to magnify our God. And as we magnify our God, number 3 there is we need to trust in his ways. I don't know about you, but when I'm facing difficulties, my first question to God is always like, God, how? Like, how is this going to work? How are you going to make this come through? Because I'm a control freak. Like, I like to be in control. I have a plan for God. I have a plan for myself, and I want to know, like, how is this going to work? And I'm sure that Joshua was the same way. In fact, when I read God's plan, I don't really like God's plan very much. Anybody else ever heard God's plan? Like, I'm not really down for that. In fact, let me read you his plan, because his plan just kind of sucks. He says, you and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to march around the town 7 times with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priest give one long blast on the ram's horns, have all the people shout as loud as they can. Then the walls of the town will collapse and the people will charge straight into the town. That's God's plan. God is basically like, Joshua, here's what I want you to do. I want you to put together a parade and get a marching band. And we're going to go to battle. Now, I don't know if you checked it out here, but did you see the worship team up here? Y'all saw them, right? Like, there aren't a lot of bodybuilders on the worship team. There aren't a lot of, like, really warrior types. I mean, like, they're not the people I want to go to battle with. Like, that is not, as much as I love Kyle, he's not my first pick to go fight somebody with. I mean, he's tough. He's normally wearing that Australian hat. He's got it off today. That's intimidating. Sorry, Kyle. But that's not how, like, I've seen the movie 300. I want Leonidas and a whole bunch of dudes with abs going to fight with me. That's who I'm looking for on my team. Like, that's the team I would pick. But God says, no. Like, get the marching band. Those trumpets, they're brutal. People are scared by them. God's ways just aren't our ways. But he says, I need you to trust my way. And this is what I found about God, is God can take down walls any way he chooses. And the way he chooses and the way I choose typically are completely different. That's why Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, I know it's wrong in your notes. It says this, trust in the Lord with all of your hearts. Lean not on your own understanding. I don't know about you, but I like leaning on my understanding. But he says, if you're going to trust me, you can't trust in you. That's difficult sometimes for us. Again, because we like control. We like trusting in our ways. But our ways can't break through a wall. Only his ways can. Some of you are facing a wall today, and I want to tell you something. The greatest way for you to trust God in trying to break through your wall, I think one of the greatest resources that God uses to help you to remember to trust him is other people. We have a saying here at Coastal, we do life together. It's one of the things that we value as a church. And the reason why we value it as a church is because when we're facing obstacles, we forget God's past faithfulness in our life. We forget everything that he's done in the past because we're so focused on the present that it overwhelms us and it overtakes us. Sometimes we need somebody to remind us of what God has done. This week, I've been facing some walls in my life. And it's been one of the hardest weeks that I've had in a long time. And my wife can attest. In fact, on Thursday, I was doing bad. I was like having a mental breakdown day. And I remember Shayla's like, hey, you just need to go home and go to sleep. And I knew that would be the worst thing for me in that moment because I could feel myself on the verge of going in almost to that kind of depressed state. I'm sure that you've all kind of been there. I've had a lot of major decisions that I've had to make and things that are out of my control that I'm trying to control, and that just wires me up. On top of that, I've been dealing with some kidney stones this week that I've never dealt with before, and that's some painful crap. And like it just has messed me up. And I remember I went and I was studying, and I was like, man, I'm struggling. And I called up two friends that man, we've just done life together forever. And I just said, man, I'm just struggling today. Remember one of them was like, what's going on? And I started the list, the list. Well, this is wrong, and this is da-da-da-da. And finally I got to the end, and I said, the biggest thing is these kidney stone things, man, they're just robbing me of strength right now. And I'm just frustrated, I'm hurting, I'm in pain. That's just the straw that's breaking the camel's back right now. I don't have any idea how I'm going to do all this. And he goes, TJ, do you remember 10 years ago when we came back from a mission trip and you were hospitalized and infectious disease doctors were being flown in to try to figure out what was wrong with you? Nobody could figure it out. You're quarantined, and we thought you could possibly die. I was like, yeah. He goes, do you remember how God miraculously healed you? You're facing a wall that could take your literal life, and within 24 hours you went from we have no clue to them releasing you with the only thing that they could diagnose you with was a fever. And he prayed for me, and he reminded me that, man, I need to trust in his ways. God has been faithful in the past. He's going to be faithful in the present because that's who he is. It's one of the reasons why we encourage you to get into connect groups, because we need people in our life that will remind us of God's past faithfulness in the midst of our present problems.
Thank you for checking out Coastal Community Church. We hope that you receive hope and encouragement through this week's message. If If this ministry has impacted your life in any way, please share your story at mystory@coastalcommunity.tv. We hope you enjoy the service.